Heyo gang, welcome back. We doing another recap video. I cut it up. I decided instead of doing like a whole 3 hour, 3.5 hour John, I'm just do this in like different segments, different pieces, so I'm gonna give you one today, one tomorrow, and so forth, you know what I mean? And yeah, that way it's shorter. It's like 20, 30 minutes. You could watch the whole thing from start to finish, that way I could get a little 100% engagement. You could hit like, you could hit subscribe, all of that, right? Like just support the boy, yo. I'm just trying to get my drawings out there. I'm just trying to get you to see the process, and like anybody could draw, bro. It just takes time. Like it literally just takes time. It takes time to learn how to draw, and it takes time to actually draw. Like you're not gonna finish a proper drawing in 5 hours, like a real good drawing, you know what I mean? You're not gonna get it done in 3 hours. Like it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some days, bro. And I feel like a lot of people don't appreciate that. They think, oh, you buying the artwork, oh, it's probably something quick they did. No, it took time. A lot of people think, or might think, oh, they want to learn how to draw, and they're expecting that they'll like get it in a day or two, and then when they realize it doesn't come that quick, they get upset and they give it all up. You can't do that, bro. It takes a while, bro. I've been drawing for 23 years, bro. 23 years. Like it takes a minute. And I'm not a master at this yet. I'm close, but I'm not a master at this yet. And it really takes a minute. So I'm going to dive right into it. I'm going to continue drawing. And we're going to get into this other crazy case with like no insane plot twist, That last one, nah, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that with that girl. I didn't expect that at all. Shorty snitched on the guy, and it turns out she knew about it the whole time. Can't trust him, bro. Can't trust him. Can't trust
November
him.
19th, 1988 was a beautiful fall morning and the first day of
Oh, hold
Thanksgiving
on. Put
break.
this on.
Two best friends were excitedly making their way to a grocery store just
Mm-hmm.
2 blocks from their homes. It was their first trip without adult supervision, and for the two fourth graders, it was a big step toward independence. Little did either of them know, a predator lurked in the shadows who was about to turn their happiest memory into a terrible nightmare.
It's a bad start.
Full of twists and turns, this case remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of our time. Known as the Heart of the Bay, Hayward, California is the central point to other cities in the East Bay Area. Its residents are described as having a lot of love and community spirit, and its suburban vibe makes it an ideal place to live for families. With the second most diverse population in California, Hayward is as welcoming as its people. Hayward is home to the beautiful Cal State University, and in 1988, Michaela Garrick and her family called it home. 9-year-old Michaela Joy Garrick was called a miracle child by her parents Susan Murch and Rod Garrick. For 5 years, Susan and Rod turned to doctors and fertility treatments before finally welcoming their beautiful daughter into the world. Michaela was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Although it was a struggle to conceive Michaela, her parents called her their blessing, as soon after her birth, they welcomed another daughter, Libby, and a son, Alex. In 1986, they made the move to Hayward, where they decided to set down roots and raise their growing family. Michaela was described as a bright and lively child. She was well behaved and listened to everything her parents told her. Sharon was described as a very caring mother, sometimes considered overprotective. She'd made sure her children were always kept close to home and under no circumstances wandered far without adult supervision. No one could blame her, though. The 1980s saw an increase in child abductions, particularly in the California area. It was a Saturday morning, November 19th, 1988, and Michaela had just finished eating breakfast with her family. When her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, came over to ask Sharon if she and Michaela could go down to the local grocery store to buy snacks,
Oh
the response
gosh.
was initially a firm no. Upset but not deterred, Michaela begged and pleaded with her mother, promising they'd be safe and come back quickly. Knowing her little girl was going to grow up sooner or later, Sharon relented and allowed them to go while reminding them to be careful.
Oh,
She gave
jeez.
Michaela $5, and the girls excitedly grabbed their scooters.
That's
Michaela turned to
sad.
Sharon and said, "I love you, Mom," before they made their way down the block and out of sight as Sharon watched them go. Her husband Ron decided to go out and do some work on the car, while Sharon went back in to clear up the breakfast dishes, unaware that in the next few minutes, her life was going to change forever. Michaela and Katrina excitedly rode their scooters toward the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard. Parking their scooters just in front of the store, both girls made their way inside to buy some snacks. After buying 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 sticks of beef jerky, and 2 pieces of cherry taffy, they walked out of the store, completely forgetting about their scooters as they chatted about plans for the holiday. Before they could leave the parking lot, though, both girls realized their scooters were still outside the store. One was missing, and Michaela and Katrina decided to split up to find the other scooter.
No.
Michaela spotted it first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and left next to a car. Without thinking, Michaela ran over to the scooter and bent down to grab hold of the handlebars. In a split second, a man had jumped out of the car and grabbed Michaela around the waist before shoving her into the back seat. Like a deer in the headlights, Katrina stood frozen to the spot as she heard her friend's screams and watched her struggle in the abductor's grip. The man peeled out of the parking space before speeding out on Mission Boulevard, heading toward Union City. Katrina immediately ran back into the store and told the cashier, Rona Ronalyn, that Michaela had just been kidnapped.
Oh, no.
Rona called the local police, who arrived in record time to the crime scene. She also contacted Katrina's father and told him what just happened at the store. Back at their home, Sharon was busy washing up the dishes when she heard frantic shouting from the outside. Rod, her husband, burst through the front door, telling her Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they made their way down to the store to find police swarming the area and speaking to customers and staff from the store. Katrina was inconsolable and was allowed to go back home with her father. Rod and Sharon remained behind, hoping to get some answers. But from deep within, a seed of fear took root as Sharon remembered a poem Michaela had written. Sharon remembered an unsettling incident just a week earlier. She'd woken up to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours of the morning. When she asked her what she was doing, Michaela told her mother she was writing a poem, but was being vague. Sharon kept asking her what the poem was about, and Michaela said she woke up after hearing noises coming from the attic and thought about people who had been kidnapped and locked away in the attic. She then told Sharon that her poem was about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, not people who were kidnapped and killed. Sharon at the time found it rather ominous that a child as cheerful as Michaela would write a poem like this. Looking back now, she believed Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. Rona, the cashier, was fortunately able to remember the man who allegedly took Michaela. She described him to police as a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She was able to make out the color of the car as being either burgundy or maroon, but could not give them details about the make or model. Rona told police that the man had parked his car and got out, but not entered the store. Instead, he lurked on the outside and looked through the window, watching the girls and other customers. She also had a feeling he was planning on possibly robbing the store. A sketch artist quickly drew a composite sketch and circulated the picture to all police stations in the area and news outlets. Investigators found the scooter and took it in as evidence. From the scooter handle, they were able to lift a latent handprint. The print was filed away to be used to identify the kidnapper, but beyond that, there were few clues they could follow up on. By the end of the first day after the abduction, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the investigation into Michaela's abduction. Given the recent spate of child abductions, the FBI were sure there must have been some link between Michaela's disappearance and that of the other missing children. However, police soon realized that Katrina may be able to give a bit more information on the suspect, as she was the key eyewitness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators paid a visit to Katrina's family home, and together with her parents, sat down and spoke to her. What she revealed had investigators reeling. The description of the kidnapper was drastically different to the one given by the store cashier. Katrina described the man as being a white male in his early 20s with long, dirty blonde hair. She said he had severe acne that scarred his face and described his eyes as being blue. Katrina remembered his eyes in particular and said to investigators, "He had fox eyes. He looked right at me, but didn't even see me." She also told investigators that his car had been either beige or tan, box-shaped, with visible body damage. This new description was concerning, as investigators realized the most crucial 48 hours had passed while they were looking for the wrong person. The posters were reprinted with the new suspect's image and redistributed in hopes of being able to garner new leads. With the new information, though, investigators now began knocking on the doors of all
she a
sex
9-year-old
offenders in the
and she
local
just
area,
watched her
asking
friend get
questions.
a 9-year-old just watching their friend get kidnapped. I don't know if I would like take all of her. I mean, you have to, but like I wouldn't get rid of what the elder person said. I'd keep that too, you know what I mean? I'd keep both, but whatever.
Volunteers came out in their numbers, knocking on doors and handing out posters that included a description of Michaela's clothes. White t-shirt with the word Metro written across it, rolled up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. When no one reported any signs of Michaela anywhere in the nearby suburbs, police extended the search to include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon that were just minutes from the Garrett family home. This search began following a tip from 3 hikers who allegedly saw footprints in the forested area belonging to 1 adult and 1 child.
Footprints?
After they'd followed the tracks, they found a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological profile also pointed out that the kidnapper was likely to take Michaela to an isolated area. Helicopters were fitted with infrared thermal cameras to pick up any signs of a heat signature within the dense wooded areas. Police officers searched on horseback and foot. All these efforts yielded no results. Michaela had vanished along with her kidnapper into thin air. Michaela's disappearance reached the national news. Her story was featured on Unsolved Mysteries and was one of the first child abductions to feature on America's Most Wanted. Her face was printed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's Program printed over 50 million mailing cards to homes around the country with pictures of Michaela, a description of her clothes.
Oh, jeez, but then now, how anybody gonna like that criminal? I think he killed her, bro. Sad to say, I think so, cause with all this press, he probably did like, yo, bro, what? I didn't know it would turn out this big. I mean, nobody gonna want, like, if you kidnap her to sell her, nobody gonna want to buy her. Bro, what? With all this heat? Nah, hell no. So what you gonna do? Try to keep her? For how long? He got a life before her, so he gotta now try to hide her in his life without anybody knowing? Nah, bro, he probably just thought his only way out was to get rid of her. But let's see how this turns out, bro, because I don't really know.
The kidnappers. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana came out in support of the Garrett family and made an appeal to the public to come forward with any information. A reward fund of $70,000 was posted during this time for any information regarding Michaela's whereabouts. Within the first year of her disappearance, police had received over 5,000 tips, most of which turned out to be rumors. But no one was ready to give up. Sharon herself followed leads, some stretching as far as Russia, but nothing yielded any results. It would take another 4 years before investigators received a new tip that they believed could be real. In that time, over 15,000 tips were received, and police were clutching at each one, hoping it could shed light on the missing girl's case. Between 1991 and 1992, an inmate in Indiana came forward with information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for a burglary charge, alleged that he helped a friend bury her body in a gladiolus field in Union City. However, investigators were not initially interested, believing it could have been a wild goose chase. When Haggard realized the investigators were not taking his claims seriously, he instead turned to the media. He wrote a letter in 1992 to the San Francisco Chronicle, claiming to know who kidnapped Michaela and where she'd been buried. He promised to lead investigators to her body. The media attention and public outcry forced investigators to fly Haggard to California in order to testify in front of a grand jury. Under oath, Haggard repeated the claims he'd been making to investigators. Haggard promised to lead investigators not only to Michaela's remains, but to the home of the alleged killer. The next day, Haggard, along with a team of investigators, searched the field that he claimed Michaela's body had been buried in. In a shocking twist, after 8 hours of intense searching, Haggard allegedly told police that he'd made a false claim after all. He told investigators that he allegedly wanted to give the Garrick family a sense of peace after all these years.
What?
Haggard was charged with perjury and sentenced to another 6 years in prison and ordered to pay Michaela's family $6,000 in damages for giving them false hope.
Bro,
Each new
what?
lead was about to take investigators down a darker path than they'd imagined. Another person of interest had long been on police radar in 1991. Timothy Binder was a 43-year-old sewage treatment plant worker. He was married with a family, but investigators were tipped off by parents in the East Bay area about Binder's creepy behavior. Parents alleged that he'd been sending young girls gifts and money in order to get closer to them. Some of the letters were reportedly written backwards and could only be read by using a mirror. Investigators looked into Binder's background and discovered that Binder drove a light blue van with a license plate that read, "Love You." The inside of his van was allegedly covered with pictures of little children, crayon drawings, and Bible verses. According to reports, he'd been arrested for attempting to lure 2 young girls into his van, but the charges were dropped. Binder, investigators discovered, had a knack for inserting himself into the cases surrounding missing children.
What?
He had made contact with Michaela's mother, Sharon, following her disappearance in November of 1988. Prior to that, he'd also made contact with Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who'd gone missing in June of the same year.
Bruh.
Both mothers reportedly told police they did not have a good feeling about Binder, and that he persisted in contacting them regarding the developments in both cases. In an eerie coincidence, Binder had written a letter to the police after Amber had disappeared. In the letter, he claimed that the next child to go missing would be a 9-year-old girl. And, weirdly enough, Michaela was the next child reported missing. In early December, Binder also sent a Christmas card to an FBI profiler with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers. On December 27, 1991, Amanda Campbell, who was aged 4, went missing from her home in Fairfield. Binder was also linked to the disappearance of 13-year-old Eileen Michelhoff from Dublin in California.
What?
In a turn of events, his generally strange behavior and interest in these cases started to garner him media attention. His name had become synonymous with the recent spate of child abductions, and people turned against him. Binder and his family were being harassed by the public who wanted answers for all the kidnappings. He eventually sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won the case. Investigators eventually eased off on Binder, with many of the opinion that all he wanted to do was play an important role in the investigation. Beneath all the mysteries, the case continued to captivate the public and challenge the investigators. Curtis Dean Anderson had also come under scrutiny following his capture and arrest in August of 2000. Following his arrest, Anderson admitted to the abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California in 1999. In a 2007 interview with the FBI, Anderson claimed to have killed another 13 women and girls.
Oh, gosh.
He also alleged to have abducted and murdered 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who he saw standing on a street corner. Before he could provide investigators with more information, though, he died on December 9, 2007, from kidney and liver failure.
I guess he deserved it.
Investigators looked into Anderson's background after his confession about killing multiple girls in his past. Records showed that Anderson was pulled over in 1989 while driving a brown 1977 Chevy sedan that matched the vehicle description given by Katrina as well. However, his death left investigators unable to probe that line of investigation. Hope wasn't lost, though. The renewed effort of investigators brought Michaela's kidnapping back into the spotlight, and with it, more attention, and new leads. Another twist comes in August 2012. Wesley Shermantine, who was one half of the murderous duo known as the Speed Freaks, contacted the Stockton Record following the suicide of his partner in crime, Lauren Herzog, in January of that year. He pointed out that Herzog bore a striking resemblance to the composite of the suspect in Michaela's case. This was strengthened by Katrina's comments that Herzog had features that looked very much like the man who kidnapped Michaela. At the direction of Shermantine, investigators began digging up a well in Linden, California, where the duo allegedly disposed of their victims. Thousands of bone fragments were discovered, some of which were believed to belong to Michaela. While the investigators never left hope of solving the case, the mystery kept baffling them further. 8 more years would pass before investigators could find a promising lead. The events that took place during this crime were truly shocking and left a lasting impact on the public.
Yeah.
But the real shocker was yet to come.
What? Even
on December
more?
21st, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI announced that they'd made an arrest in the case of Michaela Garrett. David Misch, who was 61 years old as of 2022, was charged with the kidnapping and murder of Michaela after his fingerprints were linked, using new technology, to those lifted from the scooter in 1988.
We can announce that 59-year-old David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela Garrett. He is in custody at Santa Rita Jail, here in Alameda County.
A look into Misch's background painted a shocking picture of a man who escaped justice for far too long. David Emery Misch was born on February the 19th, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois. Not much is known about his life growing up, but by the time he was 16, he had already begun his life of crime. In 1977, Misch was convicted of breaking and entering a property and sexually assaulting a maid at knife point. He was arrested, but was paroled only a year later in 1978. In February 1979, he was arrested on charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon. Those charges were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Once again, he would qualify for parole in September 1981. May 1988. He was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store and sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year probation. He was, however, released 6 months later in November of the same year. Karma finally caught up with them in December 1988. 38-year-old Margaret Ball was a longtime friend of Misch, who often helped him out in a tough spot. It's not certain what transpired between the two, but Margaret was discovered by her stepdaughter beaten and stabbed to death in a pool of blood. The beating was so severe that her front tooth was found a few feet away from her body. Police were alerted to Misch as the suspect, as they would later find evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and convicted of Margaret's murder. He was sentenced to 18 years to life. In 2018, while he was still incarcerated for Margaret Ball's murder, DNA evidence linked Misch to another double homicide in Fremont, California in 1986. 18-year-old Michelle Xavier and her best friend, 20-year-old Jennifer Dewey, went out to celebrate a birthday dinner of a family member on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, the young women drove to a convenience store before going home. Shortly after midnight, though, a motorcyclist found both women's bodies on the side of the road. They were stripped naked, and they'd been stabbed and shot. Later, an autopsy revealed that they were also sexually assaulted. Michelle's car was found 6 miles from the crime scene in the parking lot of a grocery store. The case was highly publicized, and rewards were offered, but over the years, all leads and tips would fizzle out.
Bro, it's a sick world, or no?
32 years later, DNA technology would lead detectives to David Misch. David Misch was charged with another 3 counts of murder and 1 for abduction as he serves out his current sentence. Alameda District Attorney Nancy O'Malley said that Misch had been charged with murder and 2 special circumstances. If found guilty, he could be given a death sentence. Hayward Police Chief Tony Chaplin said the disappearance of Michaela Garrett was a tragic story that gripped the Bay Area for decades. He said they were not going to stop the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that they'll find her. Michaela's father, Rod Garrett, drove over 100 miles to attend the press conference. Rod said he finds some relief knowing Mish has been identified after all these years. I'm kinda relieved that they caught someone over it, so now I don't gotta... They've got a suspect they can grill, and hopefully he'll cough up wherever the body is, he said. Sharon, who'd been diagnosed with metastatic cancer back in 2019, was unable to attend the press conference. Police Chief Tony Chaplin read a statement on her behalf. In the last year, I had to come to a place of acceptance that Michaela was probably no longer alive. But somehow, that acceptance was far more wrapped up in the idea of Michaela sitting on a fluffy thin cloud, walking on streets of gold, dancing on grassy hills, soaring among the stars. What I did not envision was my daughter as a dead child. It was only when I heard this news that this vision of reality appeared, and I've honestly not figured out what to do with it. Mish's attorney, Ernie Castillo, has been outspoken about the case involving his client. He blasted the investigation, calling the methods used to charge Mish as junk science. He said that the sudden match of the handprint after 32 years just seemed ridiculous. Castillo insists that the police are trying to pin all the blame on Mish as an easy way to close the case. Now a middle-aged woman, Katrina Rodriguez, who married and moved away from Hayward to Texas, still harbors guilt over what happened that fateful Saturday morning. Of course she would. In her mind, it was meant to be her because the scooter that was moved belonged to Katrina. This burden of guilt has driven Katrina to forget her childhood. For Sharon, she dedicated her entire life to finding Michaela. First, she waited at the door of the telephone, and as the years passed, she turned to the internet, searching. Sharon eventually started a blog called Dear Michaela. Later, she changed it to Seeker's Road. Sharon was eventually diagnosed with cancer, and after Mish was charged with Michaela's murder, the fight slowly faded out of her. She knew she would see her daughter soon. Sharon passed away in May 2022. There was one last twist to come in this already puzzling case.
Them find the guy.
As David Mish awaits trial on the charges of kidnapping and murder in the case of Michaela Garrett and the murders of Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey, new Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price created a ripple among those who had been invested in seeing David Mish pay for his crimes. Price has drawn criticism after making the decision to drop all special circumstances in the 3 killings. If convicted of all 3 counts of murder, Mish no longer faces life in prison without parole or the death penalty.
What?
After waiting 3 decades to see Mish pay for his crimes, family, friends, and supporters for Michaela might have to face the reality that Mish could get away with his crimes without facing the appropriate justice.
What?
Child safety advocate Michael Klaas, who's the father of Polly Klaas, who was abducted and killed in 1993, said it was a complete and utter betrayal. Mish's defense attorney, Eddie Castillo, welcomed the news. Each case relies heavily on questionable forensic tactics. Price's decision doesn't surprise me. In fact, it acknowledges the weakness in the case, he said. Retired Fremont Lieutenant Chuck Uller, who worked on the 1986 Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey murders, for which Mish has also been charged, said, "I think there's exceptions to every rule, and if anybody ever deserved maximum punishment, it's David Mish." A former prosecutor and KTVU legal analyst called the move reckless and said it was not a good idea to take any kind of punishment off the table from the get-go, as Michaela's body has still not been found.
Right.
It could be a bargaining chip for later. This is the poster case for putting someone in prison forever to keep him away from society. David Mish awaits trial on 3 charges of murder and 1 of kidnapping. The case of Michaela Garrett has been a story filled with twists and turns that began with a case of mistaken identity that cost law enforcement the first crucial 48 hours of the investigation. It kept a family grasping at straws for decades. And now it may give an alleged killer the opportunity to deny any involvement and keep the truth of a little girl's body's whereabouts a mystery.
Wow. That's crazy, folks. You see what happened there?
Pranks are a part of everyday life.
That ain't right. That ain't right. That ain't right at all. That ain't right at all, yo. But that was this clip, you know, of I guess that was the 2nd or 8th if you're counting backwards, you know. 10 cases with the most insane twist you've ever heard. While I'm drawing Little Baby, I'm really trying to wrap it up. As you can see in the drawing right now, I'm just like, the close is almost done. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to like, I'm just going at it, bro. So I hope you're drawing today too, and I'll see you tomorrow or whenever next I see you. You know, like, subscribe, hit the notification bells, you know, tap in with your boy for real, like, you know. Thank you, and have a good day.